All right, session 3, taking every thought captive, reframing with truth. So far we've done a couple things. We've learned to notice our thoughts, and we've learned to kind of name the patterns that they fall into, which was in our last session. But the thing that we have to understand is awareness alone doesn't change anything. That's a major thing. We need to have that, but alone by itself, there needs to be another step. What changes things is learning what to do with a thought once we notice it. And so in this session is really about action, not necessarily arguing with your thoughts, but really examining them more further. I want to read 2 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 5. That passage communicates that we take every thought captive to obey Christ. And so it's like Paul assumes that thoughts have influence before actions ever occur. This verse is not about necessarily suppressing thoughts, but really submitting them for evaluation. And the language of captivity here, to me, it implies intentionality, effort, and also practice. And so the thing I want to make sure we understand is this verse doesn't say every thought is sinful. It says every thought is inspectable, and that's what we're looking at. Okay? So taking a thought captive does not mean immediately replacing it with a verse necessarily. It means slowing down enough to ask ourselves, is this thought worthy of my obedience? And that's our push as Christians. So in other words, just because a thought shows up doesn't mean it gets to drive the boat, okay, along the way. So the question becomes, well, how do we actually do that in real life? And so we look at this idea. So why challenging thoughts matter? Well, so automatic thoughts feel true because they are fast. And remember, they're in ruts, so they're familiar. A lot of times they're emotionally charged. The brain prefers speed over accuracy most of the time, especially when you're under stress. When you're under stress, you're going to typically fall back into those ruts. Whatever those ruts were, that's usually where the brain's going to try to fall. And in essence, in a part of this process, we're trying to give it new pathways. Okay, we're trying to create new pathways that hopefully are informed by God's Word and His truth, and that provides something different for us that feels different and creates a different behavior. And so your brain's first job is usually protection. Your brain's first job is usually not precision. That's just the way our brain is wired. And that means the mind often defaults, if I'm just being honest, to the worst case interpretations. And over time, these interpretations, they become those ruts. They become habitual for us. And so a thought can feel true and sound logical, but guys, it can still be completely inaccurate. And if every thought were trustworthy, well, Scripture would never tell us to test it in the first place. I guess one way I think about it is like think about a smoke alarm in your house. Its job isn't to decide whether there is a real fire. It's to go off just in case there is. Okay. Well, smoke alarms are designed. The whole point of them is they're designed to overreact. You think about your kitchen. Like we have a crazy fire alarm in our kitchen. I mean, I'll be honest. I wish we didn't. That thing goes off. I mean, you could be making coffee and the thing's going to go off and wake everybody up. So, but think about like burnt toast, right? Burnt toast is not burning the house down. But your smoke alarm is in overreaction mode and is in a full panic at that point. But that doesn't mean there's a fire. It means the alarm is doing what it's designed to do in the first place. So if you think about your brain, your brain works the same way under stress. It would rather be wrong and loud than calm and precise. That's the way our brain works. And that means your mind often defaults to worst case interpretations, not because they're accurate, but because it's trying to be protective. Okay? So a thought can feel true and sound logical, but still be inaccurate. And so challenging a thought is, and this is something as a Christian I want to make sure we understand, challenging a thought is not doubting God, it's practicing actually wisdom and discernment along the way. So challenging thoughts, though, isn't about negativity, it's about accuracy in this path. Okay? So I want to grab your handouts, your workbook, and I want you to turn to the very back cover. The very back cover is a thought record. Okay? Sometimes I'll give this out to people in the counseling office. If I'm really working on some we're doing CBT with them, I'll send them home with this at times. I wanted you to have this because this is something you guys can use. And as you notice, I mean, you don't have to have this. You can grab a piece of paper and just draw lines and do this yourself, okay? You can do this on your phone. You don't have to have lines. You can just pull out the Notes app on your phone and just put situation, thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and alternative thoughts, and there you go. But this is kind of a cool way of visualizing it, I think. And this is kind of this is the purpose of this. So this kind of worksheet, what I believe it does is slows the moment down so we can actually see what's really happening internally. And so again, what's going to happen, so you have the situation, okay? So that's going to be like the thing that's triggering to you, okay? I mean, we could just, you can basically make up a situation. You know, a situation is someone cuts you off in traffic, right? Okay, that's a situation. And then you're going to put, and you can actually flip-flop these. You could move the emotion over here and move the thought over here. And that would maybe easier, but either way, it'll be okay. So you can put the situation, and then I would say, okay, someone cut you off in traffic, and one of y'all give me like an emotion that happens if someone cuts you off in traffic. Anger, okay? So then in emotions, we would put anger, okay? And then if we're doing this the correct way, we're basically saying there's something in my brain that made me feel anger. So what's a thought that could cause me to feel angry that has to do with someone cutting me off? Okay, I could have gotten a wreck. What else? Okay, I'm not important, right? I'm going to be late. He could have caused me in a wreck and just wrecked my brand new $50,000 car, right? There's lots of thoughts, right, that could have been happening in that moment that were going on that caused me to have the angry emotion. Okay, and then what could a behavior be? If you're angry in traffic, okay, be honest, what could a behavior be? Not that you are doing this, but blow horn? Tailgate? Let them know they're number one? Okay. That's a great way of saying that, yes. That's way better than I was going to say. Okay. What else? What have y'all... Flash your lights? What else? What have y'all seen videos of online? Get out and what? Fight. I mean, think about this. Think about the reactions that happen just because of traffic, right? You have people that this same thing can happen to. They do nothing. You have people that we've seen videos of. They pull out on an intersection. They shoot someone. They have road rage, right? Same thing happened to trigger both of them, okay? Same exact identical thing. And again, the catalyst is their thoughts. What did they allow into their thinking? What shaped their thinking over time, I would argue, to make them have that type of severe reaction, okay? And so, obviously then, for this person, we definitely want an alternative thought, okay? We want something. I'm not saying, if it's moving them from road rage, like getting out in traffic and beating someone, to telling them they're number one, well, that's a big difference behaviorally, okay? Again, showing someone number one, that may get you shot too, but at least it's not, putting you possibly in jail, okay? And often, I didn't say this yet, but often, one way you can think about this process is if you don't like a behavior that you do, okay, that can be where it starts. You're like, I don't like this thing I do, right? Well, remember, you can't necessarily just go backwards to the emotion and say, I'm going to change that emotion, okay? You have to go backwards, but a lot of times it does start. It starts with emotion you don't, a behavior, an action, or inaction you don't like. And so you have to go backwards to, well, how am I thinking about it? Because that's what's causing me to do that behavior. Maybe I have something wrong in how I'm thinking about this that I need to challenge, I need to be aware of. And then, okay, what is it? Well, how have I been thinking about this? Because however I'm thinking about it has kept me stuck, okay? Like, for example, addiction. A lot of times addiction can be the behavior. Well, what's keeping me there is how I'm processing it, right? Well, everyone does that. It's not a big deal. Everyone drinks, so, alcohol is not bad, and, and we rationalize it away, and so it keeps us doing that thing, right? But if we can work back to the top here, it's not the trigger, okay? It's not driving by a bar or seeing alcohol in the grocery store that has the power. It's how I think about it. So if I can loosen my thinking, well, eventually my emotion changes, my behavior changes, and we have what we want. Okay, so I wanted to show you the thought record. Okay, the idea is to slow things down so you can see what's going on internally. And again, this whole process is not necessarily about positive thinking; it's about accurate thinking along the way. Okay, so here we go. So we're going to go back to our situation again. You send a text message to someone important to you. Hours pass. Let me see if I have that on there. And then there's no response. Okay. And again, what we're going to do, actually, go ahead and flip to, well, maybe not yet. I'll tell you what, we'll do this. Okay, so I want you to look at, you're going to kind of look at the thought record. Okay. And so let's say that, let's say we're plugging this example into the thought record, okay? So if you want to do that, you can. So what you would do is under situation, you can put something, or you could put something like text message or something like that, okay? That's what we're working at. You send a text to someone important to you, hours pass, no response. Okay, so let's kind of walk through it to see kind of what this would look like, okay? So the situation is what happened, okay? And then let's go to thoughts. Okay, so thoughts, we could do, let's see. If I'm mind reading the scenario, you send a text to someone important to you, hours pass, and there's no response, what could be a mind reading reaction? They're mad at me, okay? So maybe under thoughts, we could put they're mad at me, okay? And then if I'm catastrophizing, what could be something I could tell myself if I'm catastrophizing? Yeah, they're in the hospital, or I've messed up something, or something like that, right? Or maybe I have all or none thinking with this. Well, if they cared, they would have responded by now, or either they care or they don't, right? And so if you think about it, if that's our situation on our thought record, those could be some of the thoughts that we're having. They're annoyed by me. They don't want to talk to me anymore. I've messed up something. Or, if they really cared about me, they would have responded by now. Either they care or they don't care, okay? And those could be our thoughts. Okay, and then if that's our thoughts, what kind of emotions could come from that? Anger, anxiety, sadness, right? And then, let's follow it. Now, what could the behavior be? What are you going to do? Huh? Yeah. You're going to be aggravated. What's the behavior going to be? I'm going to ignore them back. That would be a behavior. Okay, you could pester them, and you could go that route too. That could be a behavior. You could continue to check your phone repeatedly. You could withdraw. You could blame them, or maybe you call them and blame them, or you send them a nasty gram or something, right? Huh? Yeah, are you ignoring me, right? All of those things can be behaviors. Remember, behaviors are not always, they could be, when I say action, you could be overt, but it also could be passive too. You could just stuff it away and not do anything. It's kind of like I always say, you can sit in lazy boy and just ignore, right? And that's not going to get you anywhere, okay? And think about it. I want you to notice how much happened internally if we go through this scenario before anything actually happened externally. There was a lot, and even as we walk through this, that's one thing I think we've noticed. There's a lot going on internally before it actually happens externally. All right, so I want you to turn to, in the book, I think it's on the front end of the booklet. The booklet. If you go past the cognitive distortions, in the front of the book, you'll come to a page called Putting Thoughts on Trial. Okay, so the title says Putting Thoughts on Trial. So I want you to turn there. This is a kind of a low-level exercise I'll use with people sometimes. A lot of times, if things kind of fit, I'll start here. I like this one because it's a little more cut and dry, and with a lot of situations, this could be all you need to use on yourself. I like it too because I like the imagery kind of behind it. It says, in this exercise, you will put a thought on trial by acting as a defense attorney, a prosecutor, and a judge. Okay, so you get to be all of them to determine the accuracy of the thought. Okay, prosecution and defense. Gather evidence in support of and against your thought. Evidence can only be used if it's a verifiable fact. No interpretations, no guesses, no opinions. Okay? It's just like if we were really going to court. Okay? Your lawyer's going to stand up and he's like, whoa, 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 that's just hearsay. That's just what someone else thinks. That wasn't even, like that person told that person. All that's thrown out, right? And then the judge, which is you, come to a verdict regarding your thought. Is the thought accurate and fair? Are there other thoughts that could explain the facts? Okay, so like if you're using this, right, you would identify what the thought is. You'd write it in the thought category. And then the defense. What's the evidence for the thought? And then persecution. What's the evidence against the thought? And then as I weigh these two things, right, I come to a verdict. What is the verdict at this point? Okay? So our situation again is kind of our working example has been you send a text message to someone important to you, hours pass and there's no response, okay? And we have, they don't care about me, okay? So let's say the thought is they don't care about me. Well, number one, is there any distortion in that? If so, what distortion is that? They don't care about me. Someone, okay, I think I heard it. Mind reading, okay, so mind reading, because I'm assuming, I'm making an assumption about this, okay? So if you're doing this, you could write down in the thought category, they don't care about me. All right, what's evidence for this thought? Say it again. Lack of communication, okay, because they haven't responded yet, okay? And remember, this has to be verifiable facts. This is not interpretations, this is not feelings. Okay, it's not what someone else said. Okay, what else? Time went by. It's been several hours. Okay, is there anything else? Anything else that's a verifiable fact? So they haven't responded yet. That's a fact. It's been several hours. And maybe in there I would put down, this feels uncomfortable and anxiety provoking. That's a fact because that's how I feel. Yeah, exactly. All right. So here's the thing. I want you to notice, if that's true, what we're doing right now. Okay, if we're writing that down and we're looking at that visual, I want you to notice already, in my view, how thin the evidence already seems at this point. Okay, and now let's jump to the prosecution. Okay, evidence against the thought. Okay, so you guys help me out. What are some possible evidence that would push against this? Okay, they're busy. Phone was on silent. That's an assumption. What else? Yeah, they don't always carry their phone. They're asleep. Yeah, yeah.
It is rare, but I've replied to people and had people reply to me, and for whatever reason, it did not go through.
Yeah, there's times where it doesn't go through. Okay.
I happen to work in the technical field, and texts are one message that is not guaranteed to deliver.
Yeah, I've had that happen a lot. So here's what's interesting, okay? Because again, we're trying to look at facts. We also probably have built in some assumptions. I would say the assumptions also can be good at times because think about this. It's just like if someone cuts me off in traffic, I'm not going to hunt them down and ask them why they cut me off in traffic, right? I don't know. But so I have to do something different in that moment. I'm trying to give that driver benefit of the doubt. If I can give them benefit of the doubt and come up with possible reasons why that happened, that waters down how I feel. And we could come up with possibilities, right? And some of your answers you've given are possibilities, right? Which can be helpful. Their wife is pregnant and they got a call to go to the hospital. They got to get down there quickly. Maybe they just didn't see me because they're busy and they were distracted. Or, maybe they just got a horrible phone call that really just shook them and now they're just kind of numb driving, right? There's a bunch of stuff we could come up with that are benefit of doubts, possible things, right? But then, if we're looking for, again, possible evidence against, which is the prosecution, we could say, well, they have responded consistently in the past. I don't know what they're doing right now. They may be busy or driving or working or sleeping or distracted. There has been no conflict or tension recently. One unanswered text has happened before and it turned out to be nothing, right? And so the absence of a response is not a evidence of rejection. So then we've done that. Now we go down to the judge's verdict, okay? And we're looking for balance but accurate thought, okay? And so the verdict is not, necessarily always overly positive, okay? But we're looking for accuracy. And so this could be like an example verdict, okay? Well, I don't actually know why they haven't responded yet. There is no clear evidence that they don't care about me, though. This may feel uncomfortable, but it doesn't necessarily mean that something's wrong, right? Or there could be something like this. Maybe you say, well, until I have more information, the most accurate conclusion is that I don't have enough evidence to assume negative intent, okay? And so again, it doesn't wrap it up into a perfect vote necessarily, and I don't want y'all to leave here thinking that everything you put on trial is going to have a perfect, butterflies and rainbows kind of situation. It puts you in a more balanced place, though, where now your emotion is not way over here, it's just kind of over here. I can handle here, I can't handle over there, because that's going to drive me to do things that I'm going to regret and probably ruin the relationship and just ruin my life in some ways, okay? And so think about this. So if this is the case, if that's the verdict that we're going on, how does this verdict basically change the emotional intensity? What do you think could happen now? What'd you say? It diffuses. What else? What else changes potentially? Remember some of those emotions y'all said? My blood pressure goes down, right? My anxiety lessens. There's a less urge now to check my phone repeatedly, so it changes a behavior. There's less self-blame. There's more emotional steadiness, right? And so think about this. We didn't change the situation. We changed our relationship to the thought.
I hate that. Because if I shoot a text and nothing happens, the first thing that comes to my mind, I hope I didn't disturb them.
Yeah.
There's so much unknown in text.
Mm-hmm.
And I prefer
Yeah. Phone call. Yep.
but the first thing that comes to mind, I hope I didn't disturb.
Yeah. And too, I mean, sometimes that can be, not that that's going to rock our world necessarily, but that could be our own distortion, that we're thinking. Or maybe that prevents us sometimes, even those type of thoughts, from reaching out to someone, But I'm with you. On a basic level, we have to be careful. I've learned lessons. We have to be careful how you text and what you say, and just because it can always be construed into something different. You can't hear the tone or the inflection. There's so much you miss. So it's a lesson for us all. We have to be very careful when it comes to that. So putting a thought on trial doesn't mean we pretend everything is fine. It means we refuse to convict ourselves without evidence, okay? Because this is us.
I think that, and you talked about it earlier, I think this really helps us slow down that reaction.
Yeah.
And prevents us from doing things that we might later regret.
That's it.
Later have to apologize for.
Yeah. Which could lead us to more difficulty, and more negative thoughts and more distortions, and that becomes a big piece of it. If I can slow that down now, and I don't rush to where my brain wants to rush to something, okay? That's kind of how it's geared. And we also live in a society of rush. I don't think that helps us any. This helps us slow things down, and think about it. Oftentimes what we notice is if we were to put our thoughts on trial, my belief is that a lot of our thoughts would make it 5 minutes in court, because that lawyer would stand up and hey, that's all fake and hearsay and it has nothing to do with the truth, right? Let me ask you this. So let me jump to, let's see. Kind of going back to it. So if you look at this idea that they don't care about me, we mentioned mind reading as a potential distortion in this original thought. Is there anything else that could be there? What else did we say? Okay, could be jumping to conclusions. Okay. Okay, it could be all or nothing. I know you guys mentioned mind reading, maybe personalization, maybe catastrophizing, right? So again, there's 5 or 6 just in those like 5 words, right, that we pick up on, you know. And in all of this, you know, this is what it looks like, I believe, as we've done to kind of take a thought captive. You know, we're not taking it by force, but by truth. And the more you practice, I think the faster our brain learns not to jump straight to conviction along the way. I love 1 Thessalonians 5:21. It says, "But test everything, hold fast what is good." You know, and Paul does not limit this instruction to necessarily to teaching or prophecy. The call to test applies to anything seeking influence over our hearts and our minds as Christians. And so this verse gives us permission, in a sense, and responsibility to examine before we embrace something. You know, and so I think as we think about how this applies to thinking, you know, some thoughts really deserve to be rejected. Some deserve to be refined. Some deserve to be held on to as well. Because testing a thought does not mean distrusting God or having doubt in God. It means refusing to let untested thoughts shape our emotions and our behavior along the way. And so putting thoughts on trial, as we did, is simply obedience to this verse, really lived out in a mental way. All right, so you guys are I'm going to pair you guys up again. Okay, and here's what you're going to do. I want you guys to take a kind of a mild but potentially real situation, and you guys are going to flip back over to the thought record on the back page. Okay, so work with your partner. So if one of y'all probably needs to be the writer. Okay, so you're going to choose just a mild but real situation, and I want you to complete a thought record together. So help each other kind of identify after you do this, especially if anything is distorted. You can look for evidence. Okay, but work through. So just kind of make up a situation, make up what the thoughts could be that are probably more negative. What would the emotions be that follows that potentially? What could you see being the behavior? And if you want to, go ahead and see if you can come up with an alternative way of thinking about it, okay? On your mark, get set, go. All right, one more minute. One more minute. All right, you guys ready? This will be our last thing we do in this session, and we'll take our break. Do I have anybody that's willing to share their progression to the room? Okay. All right. What's the situation? Okay. Kid wrecks their car. Okay. Is your kid in here? Oh, so he wrecked it. You see how she's blaming on her like really fast? She's like, it was this other person over here. That's right. We're partnered up, so it's okay. All right. So kid wrecks the car. Let's do this. What's the emotion that pops up? Fear. Frustration. Anger. Okay. And then we want to go. So then there were definitely thoughts that were making that emotion pop up. So what were the thoughts?
They're hurt.
They're hurt.
They weren't paying attention.
Okay.
Is this going to be expensive?
Is this going to be expensive? Okay. All right. And then what do you do? What's the behavior then?
We cry, yell, could lose sleep, could revoke driving privileges.
Okay. Yeah, depending, and it's funny because you could almost take that and plug it into two scenarios. One that's more leaning towards is he okay in that direction versus making the assumption he's a teenager. How old are you? Are you 18? Oh, he's still a teenager. Okay. He's young and he's probably inexperienced and was doing something stupid, because he's a teen driving boy, right? So the behaviors could be different, but they also could go back and forth, right? So then what did y'all come up with for like an alternative response?
It wasn't their fault.
Okay.
We got good insurance.
Okay.
They're okay.
Yeah.
And the car can be replaced.
There you go. So she mentioned like an alternative responses. She kind of addressed each of the things that popped up. They were kind of addressing, and was able to kind of think outside the bubble a little bit. Everything is going to be okay. We got good insurance. So that's addressing if it's expensive. And she addressed the rest of the items on there along the way. The alternative thought. The big thing. The big thing is trying to do is trying to land you in like that. If he did get in a wreck, it doesn't take away the wreck, right? The wreck still happens. It's still potentially going to cost something. There's still these things that are going to take place. So you're not trying to make it go away. That's not the purpose of this. Like we can't. Like I tell people all the time when we're working on emotion, things that are really strong emotionally. Like really our goal, if I'm being honest, is sometimes I'll get them to rank the emotion from like 0 to 10, and 10 being like let's say it's depression or anxiety. I want the worst anxiousness you've ever had, the worst depression you've ever had, or whatever that emotion is, okay? And they'll say, well, Jeremy, right now it's a 9. I'm like, okay, well, here's our goal. We can't make it a 0 because it happened. I can't make someone come back to life. I can't make a car get unwrecked, okay? I can't make you get unbankrupt, okay? But you can think about it in a particular way, which is the alternative thought, that allows it to drop from a 9, which is really high, and what if we could drop it down to a 6? Or what if we could drop it down to a 5, or eventually, and I may even ask them, hey, what number could you get to that you're like, Jeremy, I would be satisfied if it just gets to this number. And they're like, some people say, well, if it gets to 4, like I'm completely good, right? Okay, well now we need to find a way to frame it enough, which is really the alternative thought, okay, or alternative thoughts, okay, because like in this scenario, there's multiple things that they were able to mention that could all be helpful to bringing it back down just a little bit to a better place. Go ahead.
Do you find that some people want to be either at a 10 or a 0?
Yeah, there's. I don't mean as. I mean, probably I probably have more people that would love. I think they come in. That's why I try to let them know in the beginning, like, hey, we don't have a magic wand, so we can't make this a zero. You know, this horrible thing happened, and your brain is going to grieve it and that loss, and you have to deal with this. But the way you think about it going forward is the way you deal with it. And so does that mean is it coping thoughts? You know, like some of the thoughts they came up with were very coping thoughts. We have insurance. It's going to be okay. We live by a good hospital. I mean, there's your things that are going to be helpful, right? But yeah, a lot of people I think come in and they would at first they would love for it just to disappear and be a zero. But I see your point. There are people who I don't come across as many of them that strangely enough they may want it to feel like it's a 10 because maybe for some reason they think it is. Like sometimes I'll have people where if it's like loss, they're like, Jeremy, I my spouse died and I haven't cried, you know, so that would be a scenario where they're like, I should be a 10, you know, but I'm not, and they're very confused, and so we have to, you know, we kind of walk through the grief and maybe what's going on internally for them, you know, that gets them to the point where they probably will have emotion at that point. But yeah, every once in a while you may come across some certain situation where they feel like internally they should be a 10. I should be mad about this, and I should hate that person for this, and I should want to punch them in the face, you know, but I don't, you know. Well, maybe you don't because Christ is in you, you know, and you've allowed God to work on your heart.
Looking at your thought record here that we just filled out, the goal should then be to swap those two columns. If you're going from left to right, to swap the alternate thought before the behavior. So if you work it all out in your head before you act.
Yeah, in a perfect world, it would be that. It would be your if it's live, the idea would be you're slowing your thoughts down enough to have the alternate thought first. So in their scenario, it would be, you know, instead of like overreacting, right, and jumping to the worst, automatically they're slowing themselves down really quickly to come up with those other additional thoughts. I always visualize like putting it in a big vat, and when you do, you water down the poison kind of thing, you know, where it's not as bad now. She's still going to not feel great because her son's gotten a wreck potentially and the car is damaged, but she has enough stuff going on else that she's put in there right away, and she's more quickly jumped to that. And I think that's where we have an advantage of being a Christian though too, right? Remember, we have that balcony view. So we have so much we can add to ourselves from Scripture that helps us jump to the alternative thought first to balance out things. I mean, even things like he's going to be okay, God's got him, but even if he's majorly hurt, God still has him. You know, and God's caring for him, and God's with those people in the hospital caring for him. And worst case, you know, I know we don't want to think this, he's going to be in heaven with God, you know. And that's a coping thought, right? A non-Christian is going to have a hard time thinking about that because they don't have that same framework or Christian worldview. So thank you for sharing. Again, I know for sake of time, I'd love to go around the room and have everyone do this, but again, that's the goal with this, is you're trying to come up with an alternative way of thinking about it, or maybe this is a real situation for you, and the idea would be for you to, what if I can bring in the new alternative thought next time and jump to that first, because it balances me out instead of allowing myself to go further. Were you going to say something, Jason? Or?
Yeah, I was going to ask a question because rewiring thoughts and this stuff makes a lot of sense in a lot of cases. How do you determine where it goes from just needing to rewire a thought to maybe some deep-seated anxiety that needs more than just a rewiring thought? Maybe
Yeah.
a clinical type thing where you
Yep.
meditation or whatever else might be involved.
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So when does it go kind of beyond some of this? So we would probably still use the same tools. I think like if it's, like in a church setting, like if it's an elder talking to someone about this, you know, I think the things you're going to look out for is, you know, what's the intensity, you know, of the emotions, you know, and what's the period of time that's passed. Have they been deeply depressed for a long period of time, or is this a short thing, right? So short, and we'll talk about this in one of our lessons today, like the difference between like diagnosable depression versus diagnosable anxiety and non-diagnosable ones as well. So when is it just normal anxiety versus deep depression or anxiety? And so the longevity of it is a key. How intense it is. I would say, like for example, if you're having panic, if you're to the point of panic attacks, that's when you need to be seeing a counselor. So that's when we're going to refer you probably for medicine and counseling. Also, if there's PTSD type symptoms, we have like acute stress and PTSD. We can have acute stress from a difficult situation, but it's not long lasting. PTSD is long lasting. Like you're continuing to deal with it months down the road, years down the road, very reactive to stimulus. And that's when, again, it's going to go a different direction. That's when it needs to go from you doing it on your own possibly and doing something like this to you probably need to be with a professional that can help you, because it's going to take a bunch of sessions to get you there. Mario?
Well, Jeremy, for the average, we're talking about baggages, right? We're talking about how baggages can really influence a person.
Mm-hmm.
And then we jump all the way down to alternative behavior or professional help.
Mm-hmm.
But for us, average Christians, we deal with people like that all the time.
Yeah.
What are the positive things that we could do
Mm-hmm.
to help navigate, the person navigate to the proper thoughts?
Mm-hmm.
Do you understand what I'm asking?
Yeah, I think so. I think a couple things, and this is kind of jumping ahead, but I think what you're communicating is, what maybe this is it. What can like the lay person do? Like what can you guys do, right? Number one, normalizing things. That's probably the biggest thing you can do. Everyone can listen, but also the more you can normalize what's happening for them. Because what we often want to do is we have all the cliche things we say. Oh, it's going to get better, honey. It's going to be like, don't worry about it, blah blah blah. And we'll go through that more today and tomorrow too. But the more you can normalize, because anyone can do that. You can, Mario, you can come beside someone and put your arm around them and say, hey, I've gone through some difficulty too, just like you, and I know you're struggling now. Your job, you're not trying to fix it. Your job is not to make it better. You can't. But you can come beside them and let them know, like, hey, we all struggle, And the more you can normalize things and let them know, like, they're not the only one, that's huge. But then I think you triage things. You become it's like the EMT versus the surgeon, okay? And this same answer would be for, like, I think the leaders of this congregation as well. This would be very similar. So you normalize things for that person, come beside them, triage things, right? So you need to be able to realize, okay, I'm the EMT and not the surgeon. The EMT is going to find out what's going on, kind of check out the scene, and take some notes along the way. And that's where you're going to ask questions, and you're going to you're not diving into the deep end of their life necessarily, but you're trying to find out enough of what's going on to know, then do I need to refer them, which will be the last piece of that. And so the more we can normalize it for people, that's a big thing. It opens them up to realizing they're not strange or weird or defective or deficient or doubting God. We can kind of triage things. So triage is we need to listen to them and come beside them and walk with them as much as we can through the difficulty. And then but through that, we're looking for those things. Is this more like PTSD type symptoms? Is this they're having panic attacks? Is this long-lasting anxiety, depression? If it is, and that's what I'm triaging and knowing is seeing that's going on, now I know this is beyond me, and I need to refer. And that's where the church or you as an individual, especially as a church, I would always encourage the church to have relationships within the community, or in this case, the state, to know where to send people. And who's going to be best for these different situations, because that's, we don't want it to get over your skis. And if it gets to some of those things, we know we need to refer. And that's loving. That's loving someone, is doing that. You know, and then the aftermath is, I don't just now ignore them. Okay, I can't fix their problems, and neither can they by themselves. But I'm going to keep walking with them. I'm going to support them as much as I can, right? I do have boundaries because there's things I can't do and I probably shouldn't try to do because I could make it worse. But I'm going to refer them and I'm going to keep checking up on them. So does that kind of answer?
Yes.
Okay. And I think that same answer would be for elders in any congregation as well. I think that would be a very similar path for elders because, unless you have an elder that's a counselor, but even if you do, probably needs to be a boundary there, because you'll be inundated at that point. So, all right, so let's hit pause. It's 12:20. How long do you want to take? I'm sorry, 11:20. 10 minutes. All right, so come back. We'll start at 11:30, and we'll do our last lesson before lunch. You guys are dismissed.